August 1944, France. For 8 punishing weeks, the Allied invasion had ground to a halt in the mud and tangled hedgerows of Normandy. 2 million soldiers were confined to an area no bigger than Connecticut. Then, like a thunderbolt, General George Patton's Third Army burst onto the scene and everything shifted. In just 30 days, Patton's units raced over 400 miles, liberated countless towns, and forced the German army into a chaotic retreat. His armored divisions moved so quickly that commanders had to rely on light aircraft to deliver orders, as radios could barely keep pace. The German high command was thrown into turmoil. Hitler dismissed several of his generals in frustration. Yet the reaction that mattered most came from Patton's superior, General Omar Bradley. What Bradley thought about Patton's lightning sweep across France would shape their reputations forever, revealing the delicate balance between America's most cautious strategist and its boldest warrior. This is the untold story of the summer that reshaped World War II. On August 1, 1944, Lieutenant General George S. Patton Jr. returned to French soil for the first time in nearly a year. The infamous slapping incidents in Sicily had cost him dearly. While other commanders orchestrated the greatest invasion in history, Patton had been sidelined in England, overseeing a phantom army meant to mislead the Germans about the D-Day landings. It was the bleakest moment of his career. Now, at last, he was entrusted with the Third United States Army, a chance for redemption. The situation in Normandy was dire. Despite the success of D-Day on June 6th, Allied progress had stalled. The Norman countryside, a maze of dense hedgerows called bocage, ancient earth walls cloaked in vegetation, divided the terrain into thousands of tiny, fortified fields. German soldiers turned each one into a deadly defensive position. American and British troops were dying by the thousands for gains measured in mere hundreds of yards. Lieutenant General Omar Nelson Bradley, commanding the 1st U.S. Army and soon to lead the 12th Army Group, had been Patton's West Point classmate in 1915, but their careers could not have diverged more. Bradley was deliberate, careful, and tactically masterful. He had never slapped a soldier or publicly berated a subordinate. Eisenhower trusted him without question. While Patton made headlines for his personality, Bradley quietly engineered victory. It was he who devised Operation Cobra, the daring offensive designed to finally break the German defenses. By his exacting standards, the plan was bold. The plan was straightforward, but daring. Concentrate overwhelming firepower on a narrow front. West of Estila, strategic bombers would rain destruction on German positions. Then armored divisions would push through the gap. The risks were immense. If it failed, casualties would be catastrophic. Bradley knew that whoever exploited the breakthrough needed speed, aggression, and boldness. That man was Patton. On July 28th, as Operation Cobra began, the two generals met. Bradley outlined the strategy and assigned Patton his mission. Once the First Army pierced the German lines, the Third Army would drive west into Brittany, securing the vital ports of Brest and Saint-Malo before swinging eastward across France. Patton listened carefully, immediately recognizing the plan's caution. That night, he wrote in his diary that Cobra was timid, but he intended to make it roar. The offensive began with a tragic friendly fire accident. American bombers, attempting to carpet bomb German defenses, mistakenly struck their own troops. Over 100 U.S. soldiers were killed, including Lieutenant General Leslie McNair, the highest-ranking American officer lost in the European theater. The catastrophe nearly derailed the operation, but Bradley, calm yet resolute, pressed forward. The bombing had shattered the German lines, leaving them vulnerable. By August 1st, Patton's Third Army was fully operational with 6 divisions, the 4th, 6th, and 7th Armored Divisions, along with the 8th, 79th, and 90th Infantry Divisions. These units would soon become legendary. Patton immediately unleashed his philosophy of warfare: relentless movement, constant reconnaissance, and never letting the enemy regroup. His orders to commanders were blunt and simple: attack without pause, within 48 hours. Third Army forces had surged 30 miles beyond the initial breach. The speed stunned everyone, even Bradley. German defenses, already weakened by Cobra, began to crumble. Patton's tanks bypassed strong points, leaving them to follow up infantry, a textbook display of mobile warfare, executed instinctively by a man who claimed never to have studied German tactics. By August 4th, the 4th Armored Division under Major General John Wood reached the strategic road junction of Avranches, controlling access to Brittany. Normandy's German positions were collapsing. Bradley, observing from headquarters, could hardly believe the pace. What pessimists predicted as a 3-week advance had been achieved in just 3 days. The week of August 6th to 13th would be remembered as the Third Army's Week of Miracles. Patton split his forces, racing in multiple directions at once. Major General Troy Middleton's the 8th Corps surged into Brittany, reaching Brest's outskirts. By August 7th, Major General Wade Hyslop's the 15th Corps wheeled south and then east, capturing Le Mans. On August 8th, Major General Walton Walker's the 20th Corps advanced directly east toward Paris. The German High Command panicked as the Third Army's blitzkrieg-style assault tore through their lines. Field Marshal Gunther von Kluge, commanding German forces in the west, reported to Hitler that the situation was critical. The Führer's reaction was, unsurprisingly, irrational: launch a counterattack at Morton, cut off Patton's supply lines, and drive the Americans back to the sea. The plan, known as Operation Luttich, would become one of Hitler's most catastrophic strategic mistakes. On August 7th, for German panzer divisions pushed west toward Morton, aiming to sever Patton's lifeline. Bradley, forewarned by ultra-intelligence, had anticipated the move. He reinforced the 30th Infantry Division holding Morton and called in overwhelming air support. For 2 days, American infantry and fighter bombers decimated the attacking German armor. The counterattack collapsed entirely and, ironically, created an opening for a crushing Allied response. Bradley recognized immediately that the German forces, having overextended westward, had left their flanks exposed. If Patton could pivot north from Avranches while British and Canadian troops pushed south from Caen, the entire German army could be trapped and annihilated. On August 8th, Bradley issued new orders. Patton was to turn north toward Argenton and close the encirclement. Patton acted with his trademark speed. By August 10th, he redirected Hyslop's the 15th Corps 90 degrees north. The French 2nd Armored Division and the American 5th Armored Division surged toward Argenton, covering more than 60 miles in just 2 days. By August 12th, they had reached the town. The jaws of the trap were closing. German units streamed east in panic, desperate to escape before the pockets sealed. Here, one of the war's most controversial decisions occurred. Patton's forces had reached Argenton and were poised to push north to meet the Canadians, closing the pocket completely. The gap was less than 25 miles. Patton called Bradley, requesting permission to advance. Bradley refused, ordering him to halt at Argenton and respect the boundary with British and Canadian forces. Patton was livid. His staff could hear him shouting across headquarters. He argued that the Germans were demoralized and retreating. This was the moment to strike, not hesitate. Yet, despite his legendary defiance, Patton obeyed. The gap remained open for several days. Montgomery's Canadian forces advanced slowly, clearing each strong point. Through the gap, 20,000 to 40,000 German troops, along with thousands of vehicles and equipment, escaped to fight again. The Falaise pocket was finally sealed on August 20th. But historians have debated Bradley's decision ever since. Some argue that his caution prolonged the war, while others stress that even with German forces escaping, the strategic situation had shifted decisively. The German army in Normandy was shattered. The 7th and 5th Panzer armies were effectively destroyed. Over 50,000 German soldiers were killed and another 200,000 captured. With the path to Paris and eventually Germany cleared, Patton was ready to drive forward faster than any army in history. By August 15th, while the battle around Falaise still raged, Patton received fresh orders from Bradley. Abandon Brittany. Ignore the ports. Push east with everything at your disposal. The original objective of capturing Brest and other Brittany ports was now irrelevant. Patton had been pushing for exactly this change for weeks, and now Third Army was free to demonstrate the full power of modern mobile warfare. Central France's terrain perfectly suited Patton's aggressive style. Beyond Normandy's hedgerows stretched open fields, rolling plains, and excellent roads. The German forces, already battered and demoralized, were in full retreat toward the Rhine. Small enemy units tried to set up defensive positions, only to be outflanked and enveloped by Patton's lightning-fast armored columns. The Third Army didn't advance, it tore through the countryside like a storm. Patton's methods, revolutionary for American forces, were built on speed and mobility. Armored reconnaissance units ranged miles ahead, scouting enemy positions and identifying routes. When contact was made, Patton rarely attacked head-on. Instead, he cut supply lines and encircled opposition, forcing surrenders or retreats. Speed was everything. He wanted the Germans off balance, never allowing them time to regroup. By August 16th, Third Army units covered 40 miles. The next day, 50 miles. The 4th Armored Division reached 54 miles in a single day, fighting continuously. Supply officers struggled to keep fuel and ammunition flowing to units often beyond radio contact, while light aircraft, L-4 and L-5 Cobs, ferried orders and intelligence forward. Major General John Wood's 4th Armored Division had an extraordinary artillery spotter, Major Charles Carpenter. Flying a tiny Piper L-4, Carpenter mounted bazookas and attacked German tanks directly, earning the nickname Bazooka Charlie. He became an emblem of Third Army's aggressive, innovative spirit, delivering orders and intelligence personally when necessary. By August 19th, Patton's forces reached the same river at multiple points. In just 18 days, Third Army had surged from Avranches to the Seine, covering over 200 miles and liberating dozens of French towns. German resistance in central France had effectively collapsed. Paris now lay ahead, and the question was no longer whether it would be liberated but who would claim that honor. Originally, Bradley and Eisenhower had planned to bypass the city. Strategically, it held little value, and supplying it would divert precious resources from the push into Germany. But politics and the rising French resistance dictated otherwise. By August 19th, fighting had broken out in Parisian streets. Charles de Gaulle demanded that Allied forces enter immediately. On August 22nd, a French resistance officer, Roger Gallois, arrived at Bradley's headquarters with urgent news. The Germans were preparing to raise Paris rather than surrender it intact. Bradley acted decisively. The city would be freed immediately, and the honor went to the French 2nd Armored Division under General Leclerc, supported by the American 4th Infantry Division. On August 25, 1944, Allied troops entered Paris. Leclerc's soldiers were met by ecstatic crowds. The city, which Hitler had demanded be defended to the last man or reduced to rubble, was liberated, largely unharmed. It was one of the defining moments of the war, made possible by Patton's rapid advance that had brought Allied forces within striking distance. Omar Bradley observed Patton's lightning campaign across France with a mix of admiration and unease. Professionally, he was thrilled. The breakthrough he had meticulously planned and Patton had ruthlessly executed had exceeded even his most optimistic expectations. Personally, their relationship was more complex. The two men had known each other for nearly 3 decades, classmates at West Point, colleagues in peacetime postings, and commanders together in North Africa and Sicily publicly. Bradley praised Patton's August 1944 operations. In staff meetings and reports to Eisenhower, he highlighted Third Army's extraordinary speed and effectiveness. On August 28th, following the liberation of Paris, he sent Patton a message. The spectacular performance of your army continues to be the highlight of the campaign. Coming from a man who rarely indulged in exaggeration, this was high praise. Privately, However, Bradley's reflections were more layered. He lauded Patton's tactical genius and his audacious, aggressive style, writing that he was the most brilliant commander of an army in the open field that our service or any other has produced. This placed Patton above all other American generals and among the finest military leaders in history. Yet Bradley also acknowledged Patton's significant flaws. He was difficult to rein in, often defied orders, and was politically tone-deaf. His habit of exceeding boundaries and ignoring coordination with the life forces constantly challenged Bradley. The Argentan controversy weighed heavily on him. Bradley felt halting Patton there was the correct military decision, preventing friendly fire and shielding exposed flanks. But he could not ignore that Patton's aggressive instincts might have been right. In his memoir A Soldier's Story 1951, Bradley admitted that failing to seal the Falaise Gap entirely remained his deepest regret of the war. Bradley's evaluation of Patton becomes clearer when contrasted with his opinions of other generals. While he worked with many exceptional commanders, Courtney Hodges, Jacob Devers, and others, he reserved his highest praise for Patton's mastery of mobile warfare. At the same time, he concluded that Patton's temperament made him unsuitable for higher command. In Bradley's view, Patton was unmatched as a corps or army commander, but lacked the diplomatic skills and emotional steadiness necessary for army group leadership or higher positions. Perhaps the most famous reflection came years later. After the 1970 film Patton starring George C. Scott, Bradley, serving as a technical advisor, later confirmed the film's portrayal of his complex feelings toward Patton, underscoring both the genius and the peril of America's most audacious general. Bradley said the film captured Patton's flair and battlefield brilliance, but it didn't fully convey the headaches he caused his superiors. He described having to prod subordinates with bluster and threats methods that delivered dramatic results, but rarely won loyalty. Perhaps the clearest illustration came during the dash across France itself. On August 16th, Bradley visited Patton's headquarters. Patton was in his element, surrounded by maps tracking his divisions racing east, while reports of German units surrendering streamed in. Bradley later recalled that Patton seemed to be practically dancing with excitement, peppering his updates with colorful language as he described dismantling the German army. Bradley, by contrast, remained measured. He reportedly told Patton, "George, you're doing exactly what we need. Keep it up." But he immediately added a caution: "Stay within your boundaries and keep me informed. I can't support you if I don't know your position." It was quintessential Bradley, acknowledgement of genius tempered with insistence on discipline. By the war's end, Third Army had seized over 80,000 square miles, fighting for 9 months with roughly 137,000 casualties, while inflicting more than 10 times than on the enemy. They had liberated countless French towns, crossed the Rhine, penetrated deep into Germany, and played a pivotal role in crushing Nazi military power. No American army had ever achieved such feats in so short a span. And A Soldier's Story. Bradley reflected on Patton's dual nature. He preferred to remember him as a flawed human being rather than a marble hero in a park. Patton could achieve the impossible, yet he also slapped shell-shocked soldiers, routinely flouted orders, and alienated allies with arrogance. Bradley's approach to managing him became a case study in leadership. How do you command a subordinate who is more famous, more aggressive, willing to take bigger risks, and in some ways, more talented than you? Bradley's answer was a mix of strategic clarity and tactical flexibility. He defined the objectives, set the non-negotiable limits, and then let Patton operate at full throttle within those boundaries. This required immense self-confidence. Bradley trusted his own judgment enough to allow Patton to shine, yet remained firm enough to overrule him when necessary, as at Argentan. The principle was simple: even Patton had limits, and discipline had to be maintained. The debate over Patton's August 1944 advance continues. Some historians argue that with full logistical support, He might have crossed the Rhine in September, potentially ending the war before Christmas. Others point out German defensive strength and Allied logistical limits, noting that the broad front approach, while slower, ultimately succeeded. Bradley's assessment was balanced. Patton probably could have gone further, but whether it would have ended the war is uncertain. What is indisputable is that Bradley's handling of Patton during France's liberation exemplifies leadership lessons still studied today. Harness talent without stifling it, set boundaries without suffocating initiative, and balance boldness with control. First, recognize and leverage the unique strengths of subordinates, even when those strengths come wrapped in difficult personalities. Second, set clear strategic goals while giving room for tactical innovation and bold execution. Third, enforce discipline without stifling initiative or creativity. Fourth, shield high-performing individuals from bureaucratic pressures that could undermine their effectiveness. Bradley also mastered ego management at the senior level. He could have been resentful that Patton attracted more public attention and acclaim. He could have micromanaged or restricted Patton to protect his own authority. Instead, Bradley prioritized the mission, understanding that Patton's achievements advanced the broader goal. Regardless of who took credit, the film Patton, influenced heavily by Bradley's memoir and his advisory role, tends to celebrate both men, but the reality was far more nuanced. They were not close friends, and Bradley often found Patton personally and professionally exasperating. Yet, he maintained professionalism and managed to work effectively with him. This ability to cooperate with people you may not like is a vital, often overlooked leadership skill. Ultimately, Bradley's assessment of Patton was straightforward. He was an exceptional field commander whose bold methods produced extraordinary results, but only when paired with oversight and guidance from higher command. Patton relied on Bradley's strategic direction, logistical planning, and discipline just as much as Bradley relied on Patton's daring and speed. The aggressive warrior needed the steady hand. The risk-taker needed the calculated assessor. The liberation of France happened faster than anyone anticipated because Patton drove the Third Army with relentless momentum. But it succeeded because Bradley provided the structure, resources, and supervision that made that speed sustainable. Together, their contrasting styles created a partnership that achieved what neither could alone: the defeat of Nazi Germany in Western Europe. Their uneasy yet effective collaboration remains one of the most remarkable command relationships in military history. If this story of courage, strategy, and leadership inspired you, hit like, share it with fellow history enthusiasts, and follow for more untold tales that shape the world.